feel like we've been in passing, but never had this like right.
Rolling.
We have 2 hours late. I'm assigned to you.
Introducing the most comprehensive protection in travel, air cover. Always included and always free. Only on a Green Day.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Is it not loud enough, I believe? Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, if you all could please find your seats. We're about to begin. As soon as everyone can just trickle on to their seats, we're going to start the town hall. Please silence your phones right now. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Tishaura O. Jones.
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to tonight's town hall featuring our 4 finalists for our next chief of police. It warms my heart to see so many residents who are invested in our city's safety and success on a cold, rainy night in December. It's a testament to the city's commitment across zip codes to participate and put the public back in public safety. Before we begin, I want to thank our gracious host, St. Louis Public Schools and Vashon High School staff. Thank you to St. Louis Board of Education President Matt Davis and members, and Dr. Kelvin Adams, Superintendent of Schools, and the leadership here at Vashon for opening their doors for such an important community event. I appreciate you generously for letting us use this space tonight. Being here at a flagship SLPS school, I first want to acknowledge the heroism of our city's police officers, paramedics, firefighters, 911 dispatchers, and SLPS safety and security staff who acted without hesitation during the senseless violence at Central and Collegiate at the Southwest Campus on October 24th. The actions of St. Louis officers saved lives and underscore the critical role that law enforcement has in our community, responding to violent crime. When I think of public safety, the students and staff at Central and Collegiate will always be in my thoughts. And as a mom, it breaks my heart when our city loses our babies to gun violence. And just this weekend, we saw 2 teenagers the same age as my son stolen from us by gun violence. So before we begin tonight's work, please join me in a moment of silence to remember the lives of Alexandria Bell and Jean Kushka and the young people we've lost to gun violence in our city. Thank you. Tonight is about making our city safer for everyone who lives, works, and visits St. Louis. The city has been engaged in a search for our next police chief, holding listening sessions and opening our police chief survey. Your attendance at this town hall tonight is a meaningful opportunity for you to hear from our top candidates about what they would bring to this key position. Your involvement in our previous listening sessions and public survey have guided our search by highlighting the qualities and experiences we must see in our next police chief. Thank you all for being here. And I made a promise to engage residents as well as to ensure that your voices were heard and what type of leader and commander should take our police department into the future. That's why when the Department of Public Safety and my office received the names of our finalists, we shared them ahead of tonight's event. As mayor, I'm committed to reimagining public safety. Part of that means reducing the burden on our officers so they can focus on their main job, solving violent crime. Our cops and clinicians in 911 diversion programs help save police time and resources by connecting the right professional to the right call. My administration has also funded, through the American Rescue Plan, community violence intervention programs in high-crime neighborhoods to address crime at its root causes: poverty, housing instability, lack of opportunities, and the like. After all, poverty is the father of crime. Our residents must be safe, no matter what part of the city they reside in or their zip code. Our solutions must be innovative and effective, and our leaders must be willing to listen to your concerns. I believe the selection of our next police chief will be pivotal in achieving this goal by taking policing into the 21st century, a modernized and equitable system with the community at the center. Our next police chief must believe in transforming public safety, be ready to deploy innovative solutions, and be committed to strengthening trust with our neighborhoods. So tonight, here are some of the questions that are on my mind, and I'm sure many of those in this room tonight and will be interested in hearing this as well. How can we best use our police resources and deploy our officers in the most efficient and effective way? In order to solve crimes, we need the community to have faith in the officers in their neighborhoods and to share information. How can our department build community trust with the neighborhoods that they serve? And most importantly, how can we make St. Louis a safer place for all of us, especially our youth and young people, who should be able to grow up secure without fear of losing their lives to gun violence? Thank you. God bless you for coming out this evening. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Dan Isom, Director of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Dan Isom, Director of Public Safety and the former police chief for the city of St. Louis. Before I bring Dr. L.J. Punch on stage to moderate, I want to quickly tell you about the format for this evening's town hall and outline the selection process up until this point. The finalists you will hear from tonight were selected from a competitive national search spearheaded by the city's Department of Personnel and in partnership with the Boulware Group, a firm with extensive experience in these types of searches. In line with the city's civil service hiring process, the Department of Public Personnel and the Boulware Group passed along candidates to the Department of Public Safety on Friday. From there, the Department of Public Safety narrowed the list to the 4 candidates you will hear from tonight. Each of the finalists will take part in a 30-minute question and answer session, one-on-one with Dr. Punch. The purpose of tonight's event is for you to hear directly from each candidate about their experience and their vision for the city of St. Louis, but to also get feedback on each one of the candidates. These questions were based on 800 responses submitted to the city's police chief survey and your concerns raised in listening sessions about this police chief of the future. To keep this process fair, each candidate will come on separately. This will ensure that the process is fair and each candidate has an equal amount of time and opportunity to respond. No finalist will hear the responses of the other candidates prior to the time they come on stage. And no candidate has received these questions prior to this town hall event. When you entered, you should have received a comment card. Please raise your comment card in the air if you received one. Thank you. Now you can lower your hands. So if you did not receive a comment card and you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand in the air. Our staff will come by and issue comment cards to you. If you keep your hand up in the air, please. So these cards are to be completed at the end of this town hall event. Please hand them in to our event staff at the front door. They are designed to give feedback on your thoughts about each candidate who will give their comments today. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Dr. L.J. Punch.
With a name like Punch, I can't let you down, right? Appreciate y'all, appreciate y'all, appreciate the opportunity. Look at all y'all. Look at all y'all, we're here. So again, I'm Dr. L.J. Punch. I am a trauma surgeon and an advocate for community health. My career has taken me from the Ivy League to the block. And I have operated and now care for the consequences of failures in public safety. And so it means so much for me to be here today. I just want to emphasize to you all this card. This tonight is your voice. This is how we can equitably give everyone here a voice. So I just really ask you to actively listen and pour your energy into this card, because this is how your voice is going to translate. We got to write it down so everyone's voice can be heard tonight in a reasonable amount of time, so we can go home and get to bed. So without any delay, I'm going to invite up Chief Robert Tracy of Wilmington, Delaware. Chief Tracy. First, we're just going to have you tell us about yourself. We're going to give you 5 minutes to share with us your qualifications for this position and why you want to be the next Chief of Police for the city of St. Louis. Chief Tracy.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here, to be one of the 4 finalists for St. Louis to be the next police commissioner. It's a great honor to be here. I'm a career law enforcement officer. Started my career almost 40 years ago. Second generation police officer. My father was a Bronx homicide detective. I was born in the Bronx. I'm married. I have 5 children. Pull the mic up a little higher. How's that sound? Yeah. There you go. Married with 5 children. I do answer. My wife is the boss. But I'm honored to be here. And the reason I would love to be here is there's such a challenge. There's hope. There's hope. There's a challenge in this community that I see that I've been to other places. I started my career in the NYPD back in 1984 and rose up through the ranks. And we're part of something in the NYPD in New York City, working together with a community that we were able to take it to a great place, working together and have a safer city. I moved on to Chicago from 2011 to 2015, and we were able to make great strides working with the community with a good foundation of a crime strategy plan and accountability. And we're able to reduce murders and shootings to 50-year lows, working with the community. And then my final stop before taking this interview, I've been the chief of police in the city of Wilmington, Delaware. Now, Wilmington, Delaware, if you look back on it, do some history, in 2015, before I arrived, there was a Newsweek article, and it called it Murder Town, USA. Murder Town, USA. And it was put on the map. But within that city, I was hired as the first outside chief in 2017 in the 250-year history of that police department, coming in from the outside, looking at things that are going on, taking strategies, working with community engagement, working together with criminal justice system, elected officials, business leaders. We were able to make great changes. And what I would love to do, this challenge in St. Louis, where we certainly have the violence and on a national level that you see each and every day that we had in Wilmington, we were able to make great strides. Working with faith-based community, coming in as an outsider, hope, resurrecting relationships, building a meritocracy, getting to know people, making sure that we're there with the community, and making sure that I, as the police chief, was out there every single day talking about our strategies and making sure that everybody knew what was expected from internally within the police department to externally what we wanted to do to improve things. So where are we now? We've built diversity. We're getting more officers into our police department. My last recruitment class was over 80% African-American candidates. Our crime from 5 years ago, shootings and murders have been cut in half by 50%. Overall crime by 35%. Clearance rates, because you're building with the community, the trust. We have clearance rates close to 70% on our homicide, where they were down at 12%. And clearance rates are closures of cases catching the bad guy that caused harm and closure to the family, and make sure that they're not out there doing the same thing over again. We have retention with our officers. We're not losing our officers the way other police departments are, and we're also not losing officers to other police departments for higher paying jobs, and also telling them they'll give them bonuses of $10,000 to $20,000 and take home vehicles, because we have a sense of purpose. We've worked with the community. The morale is good. And these are the things and the challenges that I know we have here that we'd like to replicate and do the same type of things that we did in Wilmington. I know I'm not from here, but I have come into other places and I've established relationships with all the stakeholders and made sure that they had a voice and that I listened. There's so many communities. I know there's almost 79 communities that have unique issues that we have to listen to. I have a CompStat process and accountability process that ties all these things in. And violence prevention, group violence intervention, focused deterrence. And I know the communities that we serve, even the ones that are most challenged with crime, they're safe communities. They're communities that aren't dangerous. They just have a percentage of dangerous people that are in them that we need to work on. Instead of arresting everyone, we look at the ones that are causing the violence, and we work together as a community to make it safer and try to get those people help. And if they don't get help and they continue to cause harm, then we got to do other things in the criminal justice system. And that was my promise that I've done in New York, Chicago, Wilmington, Delaware. And that's my promise to you as a community. And those are the things that I say right now, and I'll continue to say throughout the time, should you choose me and should the mayor choose me to be your next police commissioner.
Thank you, Chief. Now we're going to move into a set of questions that were generated from pulling together, as we heard from Dr. Isom earlier, nearly 800 responses. And this is a fusion of the most salient features of the survey online, as well as the active chief listening sessions that we did in the community. So first question. We've touched on this already, but I want us to really dig a little deeper here. What would you do to significantly reduce violence in St. Louis? And what have you done in the past that demonstrates effectiveness, especially when it comes to doing this for youth?
All right, places that I've been, we've had great success in doing some of the things that you talked about. I mentioned that in my opening statements. We're talking about juveniles. One of the things that I'm on, I belong to the Governor's Task Force in Delaware and the Juvenile Justice Advisory Group. There's things that we can do that we might be missing, and there's things that we need to do with partners in making sure that we're doing the things that root causes of what's happening to make sure that there are kids out there that are experiencing trauma. We got to make sure that those things are being treated. And in the Wilmington Police Department and things, I have to see exactly what's being done here. Can we improve on it? Are we doing things well? And can we improve on reducing violence for juveniles? When it comes to juveniles, we have to make sure that we're addressing those individuals that are getting involved in the violence to begin with, and to make sure that we're not just looking at the ones that are recidivists, but making sure that the ones that are the first time becoming involved in possible criminal activity is to make sure we're working on them, because if they get into the system, then the propensity for them to come out or become a recidivist goes up exponentially, because they've been put in the system. And we have to make sure we're looking at that, working with education, working with the schools, identifying these issues, that we could be a good partner with that, with the criminal justice system. When it comes to overall crime and reducing it, we really have to have a plan that's transparent. You have to look at what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and we need to be able to tell the community each and every day and actually put it up on a website. If you go to the website in Wilmington, Delaware, you can look at a comprehensive plan working with the community, how we're looking to make sure that we reduce crime. Because the informed community is the one that's going to help us the most. We have a process called CompStat. This is an accountability that ties all the strategies together, holds my department accountable, the leaders accountable, onto what they're doing, how they're doing it, and doing respectful policing, and making sure we're going to community meetings. When that's all done in together with the community, we have to make sure that we're at every community meeting. And when I walked into the last place that I worked, we didn't attend community meetings. We didn't tell them what was going on. And therefore, we only had 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 community policing officers that served the whole city, when the people that were serving calls for service were missing opportunities to connect with that community, to understand what the issues were, to identify with the community, connect with the community, and to do comprehensive strategies and intelligence-led policing that I'm asking them to do, but also what the community's asking what they want. Because I talked about individual communities in each and every city, and each one has different priorities. And we need to know that, and our commanders need to know that from the certain districts in their area, and make sure that we go out and affect the change that's needed and work with the community to reduce the violence.
So, following up on that, because the question really is about violence, recognizing violence as a particular experience which ends in the loss of life. Can you give us a specific example that would demonstrate how you have reduced violence among youth?
Well, when we say youth, are we talking under 18? I consider 18 to 24 are young people. Are we talking about people below 18? Or we
In the world of trauma, below 25 is youth.
Exactly.
And
And
so
that's,
if you want to, but I will say in our region, and the mayor has already alluded to it in her opening comments, the experience of violent death amongst children under the age of 18 is unparalleled.
absolutely.
So I do think an example that would speak to that age would be particularly powerful for the audience to hear.
We're experiencing both adult, which I still continue, juveniles, and also the juveniles. We were experiencing during the pandemic and after the George Floyd murder and civil unrest. There was children that were not going to school. There was disruptions. There were things that were happening where there was more guns in their hands, and they were shooting each other, and I was starting to have exponentially more violence with the juveniles in the city of Wilmington. What I asked is I brought in the Attorney General, I brought in the juvenile court justices. We all sat down, and what was happening was more guns were getting into their hands. What could we do to try to get in front of this? What was happening is once they were arrested with a firearm illegally, they were put right back on the street, and no one was recognizing the danger of how many times we continued to arrest them, and even individuals that were shooters. We had to make sure that we had a good plan to deal with them, to make sure that we give them the services before we release them right back out into the community, to possibly cause more harm before they had the help that they needed. We also did something else. There's a thing called focused deterrence, which is group violence intervention, and that's for adults. What we asked is the National Network of Safe Communities, where we have group violence intervention. We do a thing where we have group call-ins and we talk about the dangers of violence. We work with the community, moral voice of the community, and also try to get them help out of the services and possibly jobs. It wasn't there for the juveniles. And what we did is we pivoted and we made sure that we did custom notifications to the kids with the highest propensity for violence, visited their families, visited to make sure what was going on in the home with education officials, the criminal justice system, social service workers, mental health. And we went and we took the programs to them to find out what was going on in those homes to make sure we can get the help that they need, not just for the child, but understand the structure and the environment that they were in that can help everyone. And after doing that, we started to see the violence of our juveniles going down, and we had less shooting of juveniles, hitting it from the criminal justice standpoint and an understanding, and also hitting it from a social services standpoint through a group violence intervention. And we pivoted. We didn't stay rigid what the program was. What we tried to do is let's make sure that we can bend it in a positive way and make sure that we can go address juveniles with something that wasn't being done.
Assets, yes. Okay, next question. We're going to talk a little bit about technology. How do you ensure that police officers are deployed in a fair way across all neighborhoods? You mentioned the many neighborhoods we have. What innovations, including technology and new models of policing, do you believe have a proven community benefit and assist police to do their jobs effectively? How do you think technology should be used in policing, and how do you keep technology from reducing the human compassion police officers need to show in dealing with the public?
Great question. And, you know, technology and the human capacity, they're not mutually exclusive. They have to work. We can leverage technology to be better at policing and bring services in without not going to more meetings. I think technology can be used in favor of doing that. If we got to take a look at calls for service, you have to do an audit. Are we going to the calls for service that we should be going to? And are we going to the ones that someone else should be going to? And when you do that, you free up your officers. When they tell you, or I'm being told, and this has happened in other places, they don't have time to do anything else but go to calls for service. You look at technology, you take some of those things off the screen. When I say take off the screen, make sure that we're not responding to things that we should be responding to, which gives our officers more time to handle the community meetings, to handle those quality of life issues, to handle proactive policing, because the technology we can use, we know where the crime is going to be committed most of the time. And it's not just hot spots. It's people that have a propensity for violence that we work with the group violence intervention to see if we can get them help. And we want to make sure that as we use the intelligence, we don't over-police an area. We don't over-police an area, because what has happened so long, without intelligence, and we're not leveraging it, who, why, where, what, when, that these things give us with Real-Time Crime Center and the things that we know in policing from information and from these systems, let's make sure that we're going out and looking at the individuals where I talked about communities having some dangerous people and a small percentage of dangerous people, but they're safe communities when we take care of that small percentage. And when we're looking at that small percentage, we don't have to send 50, 60 cops into an area to actually over-police an area, arrest everyone to get the few that are doing wrong. And when you use the leverage of technology, you build trust, because the community is saying, those are the individuals who are doing it, but you're arresting everyone else, hoping to get the few that are doing wrong in our community. And there you lose trust, and you lose a chance with a relationship to work together for a common goal for a safer community. You leverage technology. ShotSpotter. ShotSpotter is a system that allows us to get to a place quicker that we might not have been able to get to because we can't identify the area just from a 911 call. We can get to within almost 3 feet of that. And when everyone's people often talk about ShotSpotter maybe in a negative way. I look at it as a positive because when you get there quicker, my offices in Wilmington and the offices in the other departments that I've worked in, we're trained in first aid and we saved many, many lives before the ambulance got there because we got there quicker and we knew exactly where to go. Secondly, it builds trust because here we are identifying when a person calls 911 that we are responding because we know exactly where to go. When it comes to shots fired incident, and you know, St. Louis is pretty similar to other cities that experiencing gun violence. Only 20% of the time people call when they hear shots fired. So unless our officer hears it and can respond that they're hearing it from their patrol car, we're not responding all those other times unless somebody's hit, unless there's a victim of a shooting. Well, you respond 100% of the time, and then you make sure you take it a step further, and you look for video, you interview witnesses to that call, you canvass areas, and you treat every shots fired incident as somebody to be shot, and the community says, wow, they do care. We've always cared, but if you're only getting calls 20% of the time, the other time, the community feels you don't care. ShotSpotter is a technology that can build trust, that can help save lives, and also can make us respond quicker to maybe get in front of these retaliatory shootings and also make sure we can make the arrest of the individual that's causing the harm out there.
So I'm hearing you talk about fairness as we do it for every time, so everyone gets the benefit.
Yes.
So talk a little bit more then about how you put the humanity or keep the humanity in place while you're using things like ShotSpotter to provide a fair experience for a community.
While you're leveraging all the technology you have, you actually can make a more efficient police department that actually can have fair policing because you're not looking at people, you're looking at statistics of numbers of where they're happening. And you're also making sure that you're treating everyone fairly and constitutionally as you're doing that. And when you free up the officers to continue to do where they would say that I'm answering too many calls for service, that I have no time to do proactive police work and also engage in quality of life issues and also go to community meetings. Now we can free those officers up because we're leveraging the technology to make us more efficient. Also look at the calls for service, look at where we need to look, not arrest individuals because we're looking to arrest everyone to try to drive down crime instead of arresting the individuals that are causing the harm, and we're working together. That builds the humanity, that builds the trust. I talked about how did we get from clearance rates where they were reported in the lower teens at some time when I came to Wilmington. Well, we can have the best detectives in the world, but if we're not having that relationship with the community, the reason why our clearance rates are so high is because the community trusts us and they're cooperating us because we're having that face-to-face conversation, not when we go to a scene where there is a shooting and the first time we're asking people information is when something bad has happened because we've always established that relationship before that happened and they're making the calls and they're letting us know who's doing it, why, or at least giving us clues that we're in the right direction. And I think because of that, that builds the humanity because we're using this technology in a positive way to make this city safer.
Okay, so last question, thank you, builds on the concepts of community trust. If you became chief of police, how would you, as an outsider with your history, work to build community trust and ensure not just trust, but accountability for the department?
There's two things that happen. You have constituencies. One, you have an internal constituency of the police department. They have to trust you as well, that you're out there to do the right thing, because you have to have police legitimacy within an organization. And if you're treating your officers with respect, you're treating them with fairness, you give them a plan of what we're going to do and what we're going to do together with the community. You hold them accountable. You have consistency of CompStat, executive management meetings. You hold your leadership accountable to a plan that's understood and that we make sure that we institutionalize within the community. And I'll get to the community part. But once, you're not going to be able to have external legitimacy if you're not fair and just within an organization. When I say fair and just, there's times I've had to discipline and fire officers in my past organization. And I've had some issues where even my union has absolutely complimented me or was not always agreeing with me, but understood I was fair and just in the decisions that I made. And that transcends out to the public, that we're going to hold our officers accountable, and our officers want to be held accountable as well. And that transcends to trust on the outside. How you start to get trust on the outside is you have to begin. And I'm always going to tell a story how I did this in my last place as an outsider. I was the first outside chief in the 250-year history of Wilmington, Delaware. So I wasn't received very well as an outsider. But I will tell you right now, from the faith-based community on everyone down, I've gotten a couple hundred phone calls asking me not to leave because I'm taking this interview tonight. And that's from reverends praying for me, bishops, multi-denominational, faith-based communities, from civic leaders to community leaders to legislators. The outpouring support didn't happen by accident. And where I started my relationship was meeting with the faith-based communities, all denominations, making sure I can meet with them, tell what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and the plan that I probably need more time than I have tonight to explain in more detail that I will go to, and certainly be transparent with that. That has happened every community meeting. We have an office at the community meeting that works the area. We have district integrity. You got to keep the same officers in the same area every time they work. Don't move them around because it's easier, because it's convenient. You have to make sure that they're there. They're at these meetings. They're answering the calls for service. Some say it's tough to do. Yeah, sometimes these things are tough to do. But when you put your mind to it, you can use technology. You can do audits on how you're doing things. You can look at calls for service to make sure, are we doing it right? And an audit needs to be made to take a look at these things. And that, I promise you, when I come in, these are the type of things that have worked, built the trust, and this is how you start to build it. And then the follow-up and sincerity that this isn't a new guy coming in telling us what we want to hear. No, it has to be consistent. You have to be regimented about it. You have to have the follow-up, and that's where you build the trust. I can say a lot of good things here tonight of what I'm going to do. And I was challenged when I came into Wilmington, Delaware. And I had told them, give me a few months, and if I'm not doing what you think I should be doing, and this is from IMAC, which is the Interdenominational Ministry Alliance Council in Wilmington, Delaware. And my city is about 65% majority minority city. And they were very focused on who the next chief is going to be, which ended up being me. And I told them, give me a chance. And if I'm not doing what needs to be done in this city, in this community, to make it a safer community with the plan and build trust, tell me what I'm missing. Right now, I talked about the relationships that I had and the dozens and dozens of phone calls, and there's a lot of prayers coming from Wilmington right now that I do well tonight and possibly be the next chief of police in St. Louis. And you know what? That didn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen just with me. It happened with my deputy chiefs, my commanders, my lieutenants, my sergeants, my corporals, my officers, because we all did this together, and we did it as a community. And I'm so proud of these officers of where they came and where their pride is and where their morale is from where it used to be. And that builds trust. We build trust, and we did this together. I always say I can have the best strategies, or we can have the best strategies in the world. But you are not going to have long-term sustainable success if you're not doing it with the community, and we're working together to make sure we get to where we need to be. And if I should be chosen and fortunate enough to be the commissioner of this city, I hope to do the same things and have the same results that we're having right now in the city that I'm actually have left. And I've actually told the mayor that no matter how this works out, I'm going to hand the keys over and make sure that the next person, where there isn't a crisis and there isn't disruption, and we'll hand those keys over to my successor because it's usually in a bad moment when a person leaves. I think it's a great moment. So either way, I would like to hand the keys over and do something else, or I'd be fortunate enough to be chosen to be your next police commissioner.
That's a word. I hope y'all took notes, Chief. Wonderful job. Appreciate you. All right.
Thank you very much.
I'm serious. Take your notes. There's a lot of gems. Goodness gracious. One more time, this is your voice. We need your voice. That's why we're taking the time to do this. Without any delay, I'm going to ask Chief Larry Boone of Norfolk, Virginia, to join me on the stage. Chief Boone is probably going to need a second, so there's no crossover on the question answering. So stretch your legs a second. Chief Boone? Not here yet. Okay. Stretch your legs a second. I'm going too fast. We got to make sure there's a chance for people to not have to overhear answers and questions. If anybody doesn't have a comment card, please make sure you get one. You need a comment card. Are there people raising their hands? It looks like staff, there are people raising their hands that need comment cards. Comment cards are coming. Once again, we need this for your voice to be heard. Stretch your legs. Okay, Chief Larry Boone. There he is. Thank you, sir. Well, on. There's your seat. So, again, I'm Dr. L.J. Punch, and appreciate you joining us this evening. Let's get right into it. Let me give you 5 minutes to start off to tell us about yourself, your qualifications for this position, and why you want to be the next Chief of Police for St. Louis City.
Well, hello, everybody. I am Larry Boone. I happen to be the former chief of Norfolk, Virginia. There you go. Can you hear me? All right. So, a little bit about me. You know, every time I speak to a group of folks, I'm always in awe because my early life doesn't say I would be here, okay? So, I grew up in New Brunswick, New Jersey, in public housing. And my neighborhood consisted of African Americans and Hispanics. And the only time I saw Caucasians were the police and my coaches. So at some point, I started having frequent encounters with police. One day on the way to school, I was stopped by 2 policemen. They had a young man in the back seat, and he was bloody about face, and they stopped me, and they positioned me so I was facing the car. And then the young man, you know, did the international no, then they turned me sideways, and he did it again, no. So the 2 cops, I'm just gonna be straight with you because that's who I am. They kicked me in my rear and said, if it wasn't you this time, N-word, it'll be you the next time. So, of course, that left an impression with me. I went to school. I was about 12 or 13 years of age, urinated myself, and that was the first personal experience I've ever had with law enforcement. So then, as I got bigger, I became more attracted to law enforcement. And at one point, I got frustrated and I bucked. You know what I mean? I bucked, and they quickly calibrated me bucking them, and My coaches, my hockey coach, basketball coach, football coach, I was fairly athletic, went to my mother and said, is there anywhere you could send him so that he doesn't become a statistic? So I moved to Northampton County, North Carolina. Total shock, okay? There was expectations that I go to church, that I say, no, sir, yes, ma'am, etc. Do homework, be in a certain time of night, all that stuff. It worked out for me, okay? I went to Georgia Southern University on a football scholarship. I was fortunate enough to be there for 2 of their national championship teams. And my senior year, I saw a policeman on his sideline. I had never seen an African-American policeman in my life. And I could not take my eyes off him because he was so well put together, poised, just immaculate. And right then and there, believe it or not, I said, that's what I want to do. Because, you know, I had this saying, and I believe it with everything in me. The me I see is the me I'll be. So, having said that, before I tried out for the law enforcement, I tried out for the National Football League. Unfortunately for me, the NFL meant not for long. So I had to get a job. And that job was where I stand now. I joined the Norfolk Police Department. I did not start taking the promotional exams until my 14th year. I was having fun in K-9, Vashon Narcotic, SWAT, the cool stuff, right? And I had a mentor that kind of kicked me in the rears and said, start taking this promotional exam. And I did. And I accelerated, coming in number 1, 2, 3, top 5 all the time. And subsequently, I went from officer to corporal to sergeant to lieutenant to captain to assistant chief to deputy chief to chief. The first officer in the history of the Norfolk Police Department to occupy all ranks. So that's the quick and short about me. I want to thank you all for showing up. This is clearly important to you because a lot of you are here. I want to thank the mayor and her staff. It's important to them. They're putting us through it. I will say this. Each of the candidates are equally capable. They all have the nuts and bolts to do this. It's all about the right fit. The right fit. That's what it comes down to. I'll yield.
Why do you want the job?
The right fit. I think I bring a certain set of skill sets to this environment. I'm an urban city chief, okay? I understand urban challenges, okay? I grew up personally, as you already heard, in those environments, and through my professional career in Norfolk, it looks like St. Louis. It looks just like it. Population to some degree, crime, shootings, things of that nature. I think you'll find me very personable. I think you'll find me very engaged. I think you'll find me not in a building somewhere writing reports. I think you'll find me right in your face talking to you about hard stuff. Believe me, I know you got hard stuff because they drove me around this city and I saw hard stuff, but I am ready to move this mountain if you'll have it.
So we're going to move on to the town hall questions. Now, these are questions that were pulled together based on nearly 800 responses to an online survey, as well as previous public listening sessions for folks to comment on their concerns around police chief. So, what would you do to significantly reduce violence in St. Louis? And what have you done in your past that demonstrates your effectiveness, especially for our youth?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. How much time do I have? That's a lot to unpack, but let me.
We're going to have you on the stage for 30 minutes.
Okay. It's an important question, so I don't want to miss something, and I'm almost certain I'll miss something. So let me start in the backwards, okay, with our youth. So Norfolk was recognized by the International Association of Police Chiefs for our community engagement with our community. So what that looked like, we developed 20 plus programs that address folks from 5 years of age to senior citizen. So one of the things we wanted to do was positively impact the school to prison pipeline. Let me tell you what that looked like. We partnered with a nonprofit that had a program where they were tutoring to students in Title I schools. In Norfolk, we had 10. I convinced my staff that it's important that we play a positive role in this. I had about 60 to 65 officers volunteer, and at the beginning of the school year, they were matched up with a young kid, kindergartner. My officers, the vast majority of them were Caucasian, and they believed in this process, but the unique experience from this endeavor, you know, we typically went to their neighborhoods when somebody was being arrested, right? Or there was some type of trauma, right? So they found themselves, the officers, as well as the child, looking at the officer in a different light. I'm used to you coming into my neighborhood, doing what you have to do. And I know when you come to my neighborhood, sometimes folks are going to go away. Now, at the end of that full school year, you had a little kid looking at that officer with a different perspective. And I will guarantee you that officer, right, had a different perspective of that kid. He's like, this is like my son, or he is like a nephew or a niece. The beauty of it, I was telling the mayor this earlier, at the end of this program, you had a grown man crying, I mean bawling. They got so attached to these kids, right? So the next following year, the officer had to pair up with another kid. And, the prior kid would see him, and he would be, hey, what about me? You know, that kind of thing. But you know, we're in our 7th year of that program. We measure success by the number of kindergartners that are able to read by the 3rd grade. Because as you all know, if you cannot read by the 3rd grade, you're going the wrong way, okay? So I won't go into all 20 programs because I don't have a lot of time, but that's our signature program, and we have others. Let's talk about crime. So I became chief in December 2016. And during that time, there was a headline that said, Norfolk has its deadliest year in a decade. Accompanying that caption was a photograph of 3 African-American young men. They all had a handgun, and they were pointing it in the air. That concerned me. It concerned me on several fronts. One front being that, as a department, if we solved a crime that involved a handgun, we would simply voucher the gun and put it in abeyance, never to look at it again. That didn't make sense to me. So what we started doing, we started tracking every handgun. We're tracking it to the original purchaser, where it was purchased, and over the course of 5 years, this is what the data showed us. And I shared this data with the community. I don't believe in anything that we do belong to us. That's not me. So the data said we collected roughly over 5,000 guns. Only 200 were reported stolen. Each of these guns were bought by this or from this particular gun shop at the tune of 97%. 100% of them were legally purchased. 100% of them ended up in our black and brown communities, in the hands of our youth as young as 11 years of age and felons. So, over 5,000 guns purchased legally, only 200 or so reported stolen. That is clear a systematic gun funnel. We started addressing that. When I made that information public, I had a congressman come see me, a couple senators, and city council members. What we were able to do once I made that information public was to create legislation that controlled how many guns you could buy a month. We used to be able to buy as many as you wanted, right? If you could afford 100 guns and you decided you didn't like them anymore, you can drop them at any intersection in the city. you'd be charged with littering. That's about it. So what we did, we made it mandatory. One gun a month. If that gun is lost or stolen, you have to report it in 24 hours. That changes behavior, okay? Because before that law, we would knock on folks' doors that we know purchased that gun, and they could just look at us just as smug and say, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So now we knock on the door, they got to talk. And most of them, as a matter of fact, can prove that they actually reported it stolen. That's measurable, okay? So my first year as chief, 2017, I took on the hard object of gangs. During my career, I served as the gang czar in the city as a lieutenant. And in Comstat, one of the things I noticed that every individual we were talking about, regardless of the crime, had some type of gang nexus. The problem was robbery wasn't talking to robbery, homicide wasn't talking to homicide, or robbery, and vice versa. So I made it mandatory that if you present information, you're going to talk and you're going to prove to me that you're talking. So in the interest of time, my first year following this process, tracking the guns, inviting community members to our Comstat meetings, particularly those communities that we are focusing on so that they understand why we're there. Cops, this is brand new work, okay? You got to pull the curtain back. So 2017 was the lowest crime it had ever been in the city of Norfolk. 2018 eclipsed 2017, 2019, et cetera, et cetera. So when I left, after 5 years, total crime reduced 25%. Now, we'll say this, we still struggle a bit with gun violence. We made huge impacts, 2017, 2018, 2019. But it was time for us to do something different, so I went to city leadership. I said, the old practices of what we're doing cannot be sustainable. We needed technology, i.e. spot shotter with a camera, okay? Shot spot with a camera. Number two, we needed a grassroots organization such as violent crime interrupters, license plate readers. I was told, Larry, you're handling crime so well, we don't need all that right now. It became problematic. I could no longer measure or manage crime the way I had been because we started having vacancies just like you're having. So it was imperative that we implemented some of this technology. Unfortunately, we did not. And as I sit here today, everything I recommended, the city of Norfolk is starting to implement.
I want to just touch a little bit on the issue of violence amongst youth and specifically talk about experience that demonstrates your ability to make an impact on youth under the age of 18 dying from bullet injuries.
Well, I think when you talk about that age group, first, one of the things we did in Norfolk is identify the source of where the guns were coming from, okay? That's the beginning. And then once you do that, I was telling the mayor again today, in one of my most violent sectors, there's 64 churches, right? And I had to convince them to have ownership of some of this stuff that's happening with our youth. So what we created was something called Clergy Patrol. And what that looked like, we had a pastor from one of the local churches riding with one of the officers. The vehicle itself said Clergy Patrol. The pastor got a jacket that said Clergy Patrol. So what they started doing was being able to interface with some of the youth that we were crossing. And the pastors generally knew the youth or knew a family member. And I won't use the word preaching to them, providing counsel, okay. That information quickly started going inside the walls of the church, and they started doing something, okay, on their own. Folks, let me just say this. If you're looking for a savior, if you're looking for a miracle, police can't do this alone, okay? They just cannot do this alone. It's going to take a holistic approach to address the concerns of St. Louis, Norfolk, and any other place that looks like this. Gone are the days that the police got to handle it by themselves. If you want to chief that believes just something opposite, I'm not that guy. So that's just some of the things that we did.
Excellent. So, how do you ensure that police officers are deployed in a fair way across all neighborhoods? We have a lot of neighborhoods here. What innovations, including technology and new models of policing, do you believe have a proven community benefit and assist police to do their jobs effectively? How do you think technology should be used in policing, and how do you keep technology from reducing the human compassion police officers need to show in dealing with the public?
That's like War and Peace, all that. So let's kind of break it down a little bit. So, you know, policing, early 90s, we came up with this model called CompStat. It was very effective. The problem was, if this room represented a hot spot, we stopped everybody moving, right? What has that done for us? We alienated folks that were supporters of the police, all for a bag of weed from one individual. So, what we do now, you gotta be more surgical. You hear me use that word a lot. More surgical in your approach. Let's say this is the hot spot, this room. I use it for demonstration purposes. And we know hot spots are driven by people, right? People and places. This front row, okay, number 101 and 102 are the folks that are driving crime in that hot spot. We know this based on our data, so that we're stopping the right people and not everybody. So, 101 and 102 live on A Avenue, okay? We know A Avenue is problematic based on calls for service. That gives us means to go into 101, right, or 102, interface with those individuals that are driving crime. My philosophy is first, prevention, intervention. Folks, some folks need to go to jail. Enforcement. That's the truth, all right? I believe in a whole lot of programs, but I was a street cop. I was a chief that made over a lot of arrests. I won't say what. But I say all that to say, so you reduce this hot spot to a 3-block by 3-block grid, right? And in that 3-block by 3-block grid, you're going to implement your technology, all right? Whether it's license plate readers, shot spotter, your community activist crime intervention groups, resources to provide 101 and 102 a different option. I was instrumental in public Project Safe Neighborhood for our city with the ATF and DEA, and we just started doing that. So what you do is you call the troublemakers into a courtroom, and the judge tells them, here's opportunities for you to do something different. And if you don't do something different, there's an opportunity for you to go to jail. What did I miss?
The compassion. You've described the technology, you've described the efficiency, but how do you stop the technology from reducing the compassion?
From reducing the compassion. Technology and compassion. So let me just say this. Right after George Floyd, the community, and I say this all the time, you center the community on every decision you make. The community wanted to see our use of force data. It was important that they see it. It was placed online for the first time in the history of the department. And when it showed an individual that went to that website, it showed the race of the officer, the race of the suspect, the type of force used, and the charge, and the location. And what we saw, I'll just be honest with you, was an adverse impact on the black and brown community. So through a partnership with Center for Policing Equity, they focused on that data to lessen some of our contact with those communities. So to answer your question, that's how I implemented technology, i.e. the use of force desktop. Compassion came by way of not me, an outside entity, looking at the analytics and saying, this is how we can reduce some of that adverse impact.
Last question. If you became police chief, how would you work to build community trust and ensure accountability for the department?
So before I answer that, because I don't know them, but I know police when I see them. So I'll say this.
There's a couple here, I think.
I'll say this. If you adhere to the Constitution, if you adhere to your training, I will stand perpendicular to the floor and back you. I don't care who the audience is. Conversely, if you do anything opposite, I will hold you accountable. And I say that because I've made a lot of decisions that are out there for public consumption, okay, regarding accountability. All right, I spent 10 years of my professional career investigating misconduct of officers. I believe there are two types of mistakes: mistake of the heart and mistake of the head. Those mistakes of the heart, I will terminate you. I have no problem doing it. I will hold you accountable. You will not review something that you know you should bring to my attention and don't bring it to my attention, then I'll be looking at you. What's the other piece of that?
Trust.
Trust. Trust. Give me more than that.
How will you work to build
trust.
community trust?
Yeah, I have a stellar record, folks, when it comes to that. Just blindly call anyone in the city of Norfolk, particularly those underdog communities, okay? Those communities that have been systematically strapped with challenges. You know, when you talk about processes, you know, it's important that you understand the history of how these places got that way. Just like I teach my training, my recruiting officers, we teach them the history of policing. Some folks don't like it, but you're going to need to know what that looks like. We talk about slave patrol, the first department developed in South Carolina in 1700. We talk about the Jim Crow era. We talk about civil rights and mass incarceration. We have to teach these kids that because they are going into environments where they expect to be readily accepted. But they don't understand that grandma lived during the era of Bull Connor, right? They don't understand all the other atrocities because we, as a profession, have failed to teach them. Am I preaching? I'm going to leave you with this. I will go to my grave believing that the women and men of this profession come to work every day to do a hard job, and they will always have my support. But that's not enough, folks. Okay, if anything this pandemic has shown us, they need the support of you all as well. Community, government, and anybody else that they have to interface with. I'm done.
Amazing job. Details. Put your voice here. Look, I'm just going to take a medical moment. 101 and 102, I'm here for you. I love you. I feel like that's what I'm here for. I'm here for 101 and 102. Right? I'm a lover, not a fighter. Anyway, so we're gonna get ready here, and I don't wanna rush because I know we have to do this process. This is quite a process, allowing for. I mean, the process in and of itself is equitable and fair, right? So we're gonna get ready for Interim Chief of Police Michael Sack from St. Louis. We're just gonna give it a minute. We're good? Just gonna give it a minute, make sure. Coming behind me, okay. See, I told you it was gonna take a second. Yes. Chief said. Stretch break. Yeah, you can move your legs. More cards needed? What do people do with their cards? What do people do with their cards? Give them back. That's what you do with the cards. You give them back. You want to collect some now? Yeah, you got 2 more candidates coming, so we want all your thoughts. If you want a second card, don't just turn your card in. You need to get that second card. All right, I don't want to lose the crowd. I don't want to lose the crowd. Okay. All right. You stretched it out. How about everybody take a deep breath? Okay, sit down. Okay, sit down for real. See, I told y'all. Sit down. We don't want to get behind. We're finally on time. All right. I'm going to once again introduce. Sit down, please. Look, I'm going to do my 911. You, sit down. You, sit down. You, sit down. Okay, here we go. Love y'all. Okay, again. The card is your voice. Please fill it out. We have 2 more candidates. This is how you make your feelings and thoughts known, responding to the amazing words you're hearing. So without any more delay, Interim Chief of Police Michael Sack, please, come on. All right. So first of all, tell us about yourself, your qualifications for this position, and why you want to be the next, not interim, Chief of Police.
Sure. Mike Sack. I've attended.
Let's just put it close.
Oh, closer? Is that
There
better?
you go.
All right.
Almost like you're eating it.
Sure, sure.
Closer than that.
Even better. All right.
There you go.
So I attended Colonel Glennon College and got my degree in philosophy and theology. Split that with a minor in American history. I love history. We went to Kennard Seminary where I got my master's, got a master's degree there in divinity, and minored in church history. Later on, after I joined the police department, I got a degree from Webster University in management and security management. So I've got a good amount of education that helps me to be self-disciplined and organized. Writing a lot of papers, you learn to be organized and organize your thoughts. I think being a good writer is important. We've got to be able to communicate, especially as the chief in writing. We don't always have an opportunity to go out and talk to people. We've got to be able to communicate in the written form. I spent 4 years, I was an ordained priest here in the Archdiocese of St. Louis. So I spent 4 years in service at St. Pius V, where I worked with the community there. Loved the service that it allowed me to perform. But after a period of time and some discernment, I believed that I had a different calling. So I came to be a police officer. Remarkably, these two are very similar in career paths. They're all about service. They're all about putting others ahead of oneself. So I think my experience through my education and my former career calling has certainly helped put me onto a path to be a good chief of police. I've spent 28 years here on the St. Louis City Police Department. I know the landscape. I spent time as a patrol officer in the Central Patrol Division in the 4th. I was a detective in the JVL Covenant Bluemeyer neighborhoods. I was a sergeant in the 2nd and again in the 4th, a lieutenant in the old 7th District here in North Patrol. I was a captain for 7 years in crimes against persons and property, where I was responsible for homicide, child abuse, domestic abuse, juvenile, bomb and arson, cybercrime, polygraph, a number of the major investigative units in the city of St. Louis that provided a variety of different services internally to investigate crime. After doing that, I was promoted to major and spent time at the Central Patrol Division, 2 years there, working with the district captains, with the neighborhood business associations there, and the neighborhood groups. From there, I think the next thing I think that really set off my career is John Hayden appointed me as the inspector of police. And it's nothing like a job of integrity that can teach you a lesson. Integrity is the ability to do the right thing when no one else is looking. And sometimes it could be hard to be that person who has to hold others accountable. It could be hard to create a unit that's going to hold officers accountable, which is the expectation of the community as well as the department that I serve and love. So I spent 4 years as the inspector of police, responsible for internal affairs investigations. The force investigation unit was revamped under my command. I also started the body camera unit. The city government had signed a contract with a company to buy us body cameras, and we're given 30 days to roll it out. While we didn't make that deadline, it just wasn't physically possible to do that. We got them out and running pretty quickly. There's a lot of hoops that had to be jumped through, and I was able to identify the right people who I trusted, people who I knew would work hard, who would do the right thing. I put them into positions, empowered them to do their jobs. I monitored them, which is what I think a role of a leader is, to give people an opportunity to do their jobs without hovering over the top of them. But that was a great learning experience for me, being the inspector. And after that, spent 6 months, I guess, in the Bureau of Community Policing with all the uniform patrol and specialized enforcement. And now I've been the interim chief for the past about 6 months now. So I think collectively that experience, that education and training, attendance at the FBI's National Academy, I attended the Force Science Institute where we look at elements as it relates to officer-involved shootings and how those should be properly investigated. I think all these things cumulatively helped me to be a better officer and certainly a person prepared to be chief.
Why you want the job?
I love the city of St. Louis, and I love this department. I've been here 28 years. My brother, Steve, God bless him, he just retired from St. Louis County after 34 years of service. And when I applied, he goes, why aren't you coming out here to the county? I've got 28 years on, so we had 6 on out in the county. I said, well, I love St. Louis. When I was at St. Pius V, Archbishop May at the time asked me to be a chaplain in the city police chaplain program, and I did that. I got an opportunity to ride along with a number of officers, meet a lot of residents. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the people, enjoyed the neighborhood where they were patrolling wherever I went. So when it came time to pick an agency, there was no doubt in my mind it was going to be the city of St. Louis.
Okay, now we're going to move into the town hall questions. These questions were pulled together from nearly 800 responses from the online survey, as well as the community listening sessions about the chief process. What would you do to significantly reduce violence in St. Louis? And what have you done in the past that demonstrates your effectiveness, especially for our youth?
Sure. Violent crime is a plague across our entire nation. It's not just here in St. Louis. But Missouri is unique because of our gun laws. I was at a meeting today with a number of other chiefs from the area, and one of them made the remark that when you come into Missouri from another state, it's like they pass out a pistol, because you're coming to Missouri, you got to have a gun. While he said it jokingly, the reality is that there are many guns in our community. All too often, my officers have to respond to scenes where children are shot or killed because of an accidental discharge that occurs, or there's gun violence, so that there's a shooting or there's a robbery. In order to address the gun violence in the city of St. Louis, I think it's imperative that we work with our elected officials from across the state to try to address some elements of the state statutes regarding gun laws to make it more difficult for individuals who shouldn't have a firearm to get access to a firearm. We recently had a police shooting where a young man should not have had a firearm. And because he did, a school teacher and a young woman are dead. And he himself is dead. We've got to do something to try to get some laws put into place that will allow for some reasonable background checks and some kind of control to where we can reduce the amount of guns that are floating around on the street. Guns are easily stolen, they're easily carried about, and that occurs in burglaries and car clottings that you probably see as residents in our news regularly here in the city as well as out in the county. It's no surprise that auto theft is up across the country. And as autos are being stolen or broken into, firearms are being stolen as well. I think in order to address violence in the city of St. Louis, we got to address the gun laws. We got to find a way to engage families to be more active and proactive with kids in their households, to be respectful of firearms. If we could do that kind of education piece, that'll be helpful as all. Now, what could we do as a police department? We're the police department. What are we doing about violent crime? We have hundreds of dedicated officers who every day and every night patrol our streets. They work hard to engage those individuals who, based on the conduct that they're engaged in, appear to be someone who might be stepping out of bounds. And so the officers will do a pedestrian check or maybe a vehicle check and see if we can't remove some of those firearms from the street. We might have individuals who are operating stolen vehicles or vehicles that are taken in carjackings. The use of technology has been very helpful. In St. Louis, we've had some very generous donors, and we've been able to purchase on our own license plate recognition equipment that will trigger us for an immediate response if a car maybe taken in a carjacking or wanted for a violent offense is seen on a particular street. So there's no doubt it's exactly here at this moment. Officers can be dispatched at that location with a description of the vehicle and can engage that vehicle and attempt to do a car stop and most likely pull out a person who might be responsible for a violent offense and recover that firearm. Then again, addressing violent crime is a collective effort. So, the officers do a great job preparing reports. We present those reports to the Circuit Attorney's Office for prosecution. So we rely on a variety of different things within that path of law enforcement, from the officer's observations, technology being able to give us tips on where to be at a given time, and the action taken by the officers to effect a stop or an arrest and a presentation of warrants at the Circuit Attorney's Office. When it comes to the children and the youth and how we might be able to address them as it relates to gun violence, I think a lot of it has to do with education at the home, not necessarily at a school setting, but talking about how firearms are dangerous, that they aren't, they're dangerous tools. Their very intention is violence. And we really need to impress upon our young people that this isn't a video game, that this is forever. And so we really need to work to try to develop our youth to be more thoughtful in what they do and the decisions they make. I would always encourage parents, if they find a firearm in the home, and it's happened before, where a parent might sign a consent to search where we can take a firearm from that household, and that's always helpful. But there's a number of things that we have been doing, and we hope to be able to continue those.
Okay, for you specifically, share with us something that you have done that demonstrates your effectiveness around the issue of reducing violence.
Sure. So I have worked in looking at the city of St. Louis. The bulk of our violent crime is occurring in the 4th, 5th, and 6th districts. Now, we do have violent crime in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, but the bulk of it's occurring in those districts. So from the time I was assigned to community policing up until now, when we get new recruits out of the academy, that's where all those officers are going. That's where those resources are going. When we look at crime daily, we look at activities, we try to identify any patterns that might be there, any suspects we might want to look for. I'm able to work with my bureau commander in community policing and specialized enforcement to put specialized units, whether it be mobile, SWAT, or anti-crime, into those neighborhoods where we're experiencing problems. If there's resources needed, for example, this past summer we had some homicides occur within a particular block. So we're able to put, I was able to, you ask the chief says yes, they're going to get, a sky cop put up on a particular block. They're going to get extra, patrols in a particular neighborhood. So it's not Mike Sack going out and finding the guy in the alley that did something. It's Mike Sack being able to enable others within the department to do their jobs, to use the resources that are at their disposal, to be their champion, saying, hey, these officers are doing a good job. We need to provide them with whatever resources are needed, whether it be sky cops or other equipment that will be helpful in combating crime.
Have those approaches significantly reduced violence in St. Louis?
That's a question that an individual person would have to answer. I'll answer your question. But I think anyone who's a victim of crime, they would say no, because I was victimized. I was assaulted, I was robbed, I was shot. So that's a very personal thing, and it's a very traumatic thing. Violent crime in the...
I'm sorry, we're not going to take public comment, but I implore you to get one of your comment sheets. This is your voice. Thank you so much. Go ahead, continue, Chief.
Sure. On paper, violent crimes against persons is down about 5.25%. That's not a lot, but it's good. It's better than it was last year. If we can keep driving it down every year, that's good. But that still means there's a lot of people out there who are victims of violent crime. I'm sorry to tell you all that we have 183 persons who lost their lives this year in homicides. Last year was 180, so we're up 3. That's not a number, that's a person, that's a family. That's people who live in a particular block. People who go to church, who go to a business, they've got friends. All these people are impacted by this violent crime that's senseless. Violent crime is down 5%, and we can, say that's a great thing, but the reality is we've got people out there who've been victimized, and we've got a lot of work to do. And it's not just us. This is a collective effort. Policing isn't just for the police. It's something that it's collective action by elected officials, by schools, by churches, by neighborhood groups, and law enforcement to address a myriad of issues that exist within our community, including state laws, so that we could try and drive down violence and create a safer environment for all of us.
Okay, next question. How do you ensure that police officers are deployed to our many, many neighborhoods in a fair way? What innovations, including technology and new models of policing, do you believe have a proven community benefit and assist police to do their jobs effectively? How do you think technology should be used in policing, and how do you keep technology from reducing the human compassion police officers need to show in dealing with the public?
Okay, I'll try to get through all those. So, no two crimes are alike. So, I say this all the time. There was a philosophy several police administrations ago where we put 100 cops in every district and everything will be the same, everything will be fair. Well, the reality is a particular crime may only require a single officer or maybe 2 officers to respond. Another crime, such as a shooting or a homicide, may require a dozen to respond, not all uniform. There might be 3 or 4 uniform officers, a handful of detectives, some sergeants, evidence technicians, who are responding, people from Intel or the gang squad who would be responding to that event. So 2 crimes aren't the same. So we can't put the same number of police officers into every district and then say that we're going to be able to police fairly across the entire city. So the way I've looked at it is that we need additional police officer resources in those neighborhoods where there is more violence, because response to that violence requires more officers to conduct secure the scene, conduct the interviews, and conduct an investigation. So that's why, if you look at the numbers, I've been pushing more people to the 4th, 5th, and 6th districts, because that's where I believe we need the officers. First, for their presence, because that's where we're experiencing the violent crime. Secondly, to be able to provide a robust response to those incidents so that we can bring some calm and peace to the neighborhood, so that the detectives have time to work the case before we take any kind of retaliatory action after that by somebody else who wants to act out because of a homicide or a shooting that had occurred. Technology is important. Right now, our crime analysis unit goes through the data through our record management system. We now have a new system called SWIFT. We're going through growing pains yet on this. If any of you start a new computer program at work, you'll understand. So as we're working through SWIFT, our crime analysis unit crunches the numbers, and they try and determine what areas are experiencing ongoing crime or upticks in crime. They try and look at dates and times or movement. They look at descriptions of vehicles and individuals. Somebody might have the same type of clothing or the same vehicle that they're using, because this is a mobile society. So somebody might do an offense in one location and repeat that offense in another location as well. So we use those individuals, crunching the numbers through SWIFT Protect. Well, recently, through the wisdom I now see him, Dr. Isom, recommendation to purchase a tool called Geolitica, which I just found out today is in its test phases in one of our districts. And the advantage of Geolitica, when it gathers enough data, is it'll produce the information that crime analysis had to spend a lot of hours to crunch. So we could buy back all that time from those individuals and better use their time doing research in other areas to help us reduce crime or to place our staffing. So I'm hopeful that this Geolitica approach will allow us an opportunity to put officers smartly into areas and give commanders an opportunity to see that officers are patrolling those areas that need to be patrolled because of these upticks. Also, a little drama. So kids, anybody younger than me, I'm 60, and I just got rid of my flip phone last year. But these kids out here play on computers, and they could do so much with them, and it amazes me. I grew up in a year when the phone was hooked to the wall, and you couldn't go very far, but now there's so much more you can do. And in this Geolitica program, officers are able to watch and manage themselves, the amount of time and activity that they do in these little hot zones where we're experiencing problems. So it's kind of like a little game for them where they want to spend time in those particular areas. They're able to see when somebody else has been there, so they don't have to double up and go there at the same time. They might go later, so that we can expand our presence in a particular small radius, just a few square blocks, by staggering that presence out. So technology is going to be the answer for our department going forward. We have to leverage it in regards to our staffing. I think all police departments across the country are going to continue to leverage technology to better employ their officers, whether it be the LPRs that can put us right in a particular spot where there's a carjacked vehicle, or some of the sky cops that are up there that are sitting in locations where we've got high drug traffic or incidents of violence that can kind of monitor that activity. We're going to have to leverage the existing technology and look at new technologies that are coming out and try and figure out how we can use those to more smartly use our officers and our civilians' time.
Have you ever had to sleep with one of those sky cops outside your window? I have, and it's hard. It's not a game. So I want to bring us back. I want to bring us back to this question of how do we make sure that technology doesn't reduce our compassion for the humans that the police are then in place to serve.
Thank you. That's probably the most important part of the question. I appreciate you bringing me back to that. Policing is a very personal thing. An officer gets inside a Tahoe, they get a radio assignment, and they respond, and they see a person. Not randomly, it might be an abandoned automobile, but for the most part, they're engaging a person. And this is probably the worst day that they've had in a long time. And for some of them, it might be the worst day of their entire lives. And I'm very proud of our officers that for the most part, they exhibit a great deal of compassion when they interact with their officers, when they interact with our citizens or our visitors here to the city of St. Louis. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have outliers, and I'm not, I'm not here to tell you that we don't. We do, and I've been able to deal with them as well, holding people accountable to, and body cameras, another piece of technology, helps us hold officers accountable. But policing is a personal thing. We encounter a person, we need a lot of information from them. We need, and it all goes into the report, and we need a statement from them. But you can't just walk up to somebody cold when they had their purse stolen or their car broken into. You've got to build a little bit of rapport with them. So to do that, an officer's got to take a breath and kind of talk to them. And I've seen it myself as a young officer and as a lieutenant on different scenes. I've seen officers engage citizens. They're very professional. They're very polite. They're very courteous. They understand this is a bad day. And they take the report. And for the most part, because they do such a good job, a lot of times that behavior goes unnoticed. It's only the behavior of some of our outliers that goes noticed. It's my hope to recognize more officers whose behavior is good. So I know there's a spot on our portal for people to compliment officers, and I encourage people to do that. I know they get notes in the mail now and again from people who are appreciative, and that's important for them to know that they're doing a good job. It's one thing to hear it from Mike Sack, it's something else to hear it from a citizen, but it's always important to remember that policing is a personal thing. Technology is a tool. The cars we drive are tools, but it's the human interaction. It's our ability to communicate, to de-escalate critical situations, to take control in frantic, chaotic situations that really make the difference between us and any other profession.
Last question. If you became police chief, how would you work to build community trust and ensure accountability for the department?
So I think what we have to do as a department is actually continue what we've been doing since 2018, when I was identified or named by then Chief John Hayden as the Inspector of Police. I told him when he gave me the job that I was going to do a good job, and that I'm not going to own anybody else's dirt, and that if somebody did something wrong, I'm going to hold them accountable. He understood, and he stood by me. There were enablers within the department that kind of protected people. That didn't work anymore. Like I said, sometimes when you do the right thing, integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And it comes at a price sometimes. And so sometimes you may not be well liked. Sometimes people who don't have all the facts pass judgment. But IED needed to be refreshed. It had grown stale, and I was able to bring in a new commander, a deputy commander, and some detective sergeants who were focused on doing the right thing. They did the right thing, and if doing the right thing results in a discovery of probable cause for criminal offense, then that's where we go. We applied on officers at the state and the federal level. We disciplined officers. I terminated officers. These are the hard things that have to be done within a police department in order to ensure that people inside and outside know that we're going to hold ourselves accountable. Minor infractions are minor infractions, but there are some issues that are so great that we have to part ways. There are some issues that rise to the point that there might be criminal prosecution. Accountability is one of the most important parts of representing a police department. It's the expectation of the community that we do the right thing, that we police fairly, that we're even-handed with everyone, regardless of their state in the community, their status in the community, whether you own a business or you're homeless. If you're a visitor or you're a 30-year resident, everybody should feel that they're going to be treated fairly by the police. That's their expectation, and that's my expectation of the officers. And I think there's an understanding now over the past 4 years now that, hey, this is how we have to police. And I think officers take pride when they do it right. You know, I think they take pride when citizens recognize their good work. It's a boost in the arm to hear the community say, hey, I know you're doing a good job. You're an honest policeman. It's a shame that that has to be said. But the reality is most police officers are great people who love the city and who do well. We do have some outliers, and I've been able to hold them accountable. The same is the case in our force investigation unit. When I took over as the inspector, I found issues within that unit as well. So we had to refresh it. We refreshed it. They conduct all the officer-involved shooting incidents. They conduct all the in-custody deaths. Previously, they had not investigated an officer discharges his weapon and misses somebody. This unit does that now. An officer discharged their weapon. Their intent was to strike somebody with gunfire. That belongs in a specialized unit where there's going to be an objective and fair investigation. And the same with the body-worn camera. When that came to me as well, I rolled that out. I picked individuals who I knew would do an honest job, that they were men and women of integrity, and I was very proud to put them in there. I know that it's another tool that we could use to help keep officers accountable for their behavior.
I just got to get to one more thing, though. Back to the issue of trust. Chief Sack, if I'm somebody who has not in my life experienced policing as something that was in place to preserve my life, why should I trust you?
Exactly. That's the problem.
And how will you build that trust?
Right. It's easy to go to some place and find people who love police officers and say, hey, we trust the officers. But to go to a household where the uncle said that he was beaten by police officers behind a liquor store or something like that, that's a person's, shared experience with other people. So there are individuals in our community who do not trust us, and I understand that. And how do we build that trust? One person at a time. We build that one person at a time. We do that by living our core values. So by living our core values, service, when I greet the recruits when they come into the academy that first day. And when I ask, why is it that you want to be a police officer? Almost everybody says, I want to serve others. I want to help people.
Hold on a second. I'm going to ask you to put your comments. Chief, you just have 30 more seconds.
Sure. Leadership, integrity, and fair treatment to all. If we can live these core values every day over time, we'll win that person back. It's not going to, we shouldn't have any expectation that I come in and say, hey, I'm Mike, trust me. We have to live those core values. And it's only in living those values that we're going to win people back one at a time.
Thank you, Chief. I just want to say it's not that I'm not trying to tell nobody to be quiet. I just want you to put what you're saying on this card. There's a lot of people in here, and everyone's voice is important. But the way we do this in a democratic way so everyone gets heard is to put your questions and concerns on this card. And specifically to talk about the candidates and what you've heard from them. Let's do a quick stretch break while we go. Our last candidate is virtual.
Testifying in a murder trial.
What's this job?
Yeah.
Well, I think they're going to do the Zoom. So I got my questions. You want me to see the screen and sitting there? I can frame up both. You want to see what? How you doing? You guys say welcome to Yeah. Okay. Okay. Just the screen. Does Jerry have the main shot, I guess? I guess he has. Yeah. Okay,
Okay, before we get too rowdy, let's take a seat. We are on time. We're on time. So take a seat, take a seat, you take a seat, you take a seat. 101. I have a plan for you, 101. I'm going to find you something better to do because I love you and I don't want you because I don't think that's the answer, but that's just me. Okay, separate talk. All right, sit down, sit down. We're getting our candidate online. Post-pandemic life, right? We're going to do this virtually. Everybody take a seat. I want to make sure everyone can hear. Chief, just say hi real quick so we can make sure we hear you before I say hi. Uh-huh. Who's helping me? I'm not sure he can hear me. His mic is not muted, and I think he can hear me talking. Oh, no, that's me talking. Unmute. Can you see me? Of course he can't see because nobody's looking at me.
Why don't you?
I can't push it. It's a screen. That's not a touch screen. Who has got the controls? Somebody over there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
No. Yes, there we go. All right. But you can't see me, right?
I can't see you now.
That's okay. Is that loud enough? No. No. Who's controlling that? I'm just looking and looking.
Oh, there.
Listen. Oh, nice. Can you say hi again, Chief?
Hi.
Okay. Is it too loud? Say my name is Chief. No. All right, without any delay, this is Deputy Chief Melron Kelly joining us from Columbia, South Carolina. Chief, I'm Dr. L.J. Punch, a trauma surgeon and a community advocate. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Is that okay? Volume? Is all right? Okay. All right. First, we're going to give you 5 minutes to tell us about yourself, your qualifications for this position, and why you want to be the next police chief of St. Louis.
Thank you. My name is Melron Kelly from Columbia, South Carolina, born and raised. I attended schools here locally and went to college at South Carolina State University, which is in Mooresville, South Carolina. Started at the Columbia Police Department in 1999, where I served as a patrol officer for a number of years. after that, transitioning over into the narcotics unit where I served as a narcotics investigator, both working in an undercover capacity and an investigative capacity. Some years later, I transitioned back to patrol and worked various assignments, ultimately ending back in the narcotics unit where I stayed as a supervisor through the ranks of corporal, sergeant, and ultimately lieutenant. I became a police captain in our north end of Columbia, where I oversaw a patrol region for about a year, and I got appointed to police major, where I oversaw patrol services for the entire city of Columbia. In early 2014, I served as the acting police chief for a period of time while we were undergoing a police chief search. At the time, we hired a police chief, and I was appointed to deputy chief of police in 2014, where I currently serve. I want to be a part or be on the cusp of change of what's happening in St. Louis. I visited St. Louis in July, and I was just impressed with the city, the hospitality. It reminds me of the Southern hospitality that we have here, and I see the potential for change and growth, and I want to be a part of that.
Okay. Now we're going to move into our town hall questions.
Okay.
These questions were put together from an online survey of nearly 800 responses, as well as our previous police chief listening sessions in the community. Number one, what would you do to significantly reduce violence in St. Louis? And what have you done in the past that demonstrates your effectiveness, especially for our youth?
Definitely. To reduce violence in any city, especially a city as large as St. Louis, is you would need to identify that core group of individuals that's responsible for a majority of the crime. We do know that in most jurisdictions, it's only a small percentage of the people that are responsible for most of the violence. Identify those individuals and investigate them and remove them, unfortunately, from society in order to hold them accountable. The other part of that is including the community and how and why we're going to reduce violence, giving them voice in how we police, where we police, and the strategies that we do that will help us and make them a part of our violence reduction strategy. The co-responder model is a definite part of that process. A lot of times when officers are responding to violent scenes, they're doing so alone. I believe in a co-responder model that we can have members of the community to act as our ambassadors as well when we're serving, responding to communities to make sure that they know we're here, we care about them as well. Those things together will help us reduce violence in other parts of the cities if we do it effectively. As it relates to youth, I think that, that's the most tragic part of what we're seeing in this whole nation, especially African-American males under the age of 18, at least in my city, are being involved in acts of violence, both as the victim and the suspect. How we identify ways to reduce those acts of violence is, again, giving them voice, making sure that there are opportunities for them to succeed. No matter where violence occurs in the city, that should move you as a resident. A lot of times if it doesn't affect us personally or someone we know, we kind of move on, but we need to spread the message that in our city it's enough. And some strategies to do that is increasing work opportunities, increasing re-entry opportunities, even at the juvenile level, as well as making sure that those families impacted by violence, especially at the younger ages, understand that we can help them, and we're going to continue to make strides to reduce those efforts collectively as both police and citizens as a community.
Chief, does removing someone from society
Yes.
who has done an act of violence reduce violence?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just quoting your words back to you.
Okay. Unfortunately, that is a part of what we do as police officers. It's not a popular decision. It's not something that I take pride in saying, but we do know that there are individuals in our communities that commit at the most heinous parts, violent acts over and over. Those people, unfortunately, have to be incarcerated or should be incarcerated for a period of time in order to bring justice to society and to their victims. Again, it's not a popular thing to say as a police officer. It's the absolute part of my job to have someone sentenced to a long period of time. But it's also hard to explain to a mother that their child isn't coming home anymore. You have 183 families in the city of St. Louis that will have an empty seat at the table because of an act of violence. And unfortunately, again, it's not a popular decision, but that's what we have to do in order to keep the entire community safe. We have to remove individuals from society for a period of time.
And what have you done specifically in the past that demonstrates your effectiveness in reducing violence?
Definitely. Trying to prevent from its onset of violence. We initiated a program in the city of Columbia. One of the programs we initiated was the Justice Ambassadors. Some years ago, we started our citizens review boards, where citizens came in and reviewed active discipline and policy violations that we did in the police department. But I thought it necessary to include our youth in how they were being policed and giving them voice and how we police them. A lot of times we as adults are in the rooms discussing how we're going to handle or address acts of juvenile violence. But how can we best do that if they're not in the room and they don't have a voice as well? So we initiated that program, and we meet with high school students bi-monthly, and we give them voice in how they're being policed, the policies that impact them, school choices, sexual violence, current events, and things of that nature in order to help reduce violence. And a lot of times, these individuals would definitely not be having a conversation with police, but they come into the police department and have a dialogue with us. The other thing that we do, and is pay dividends, is our handle with care. If a young person has been a part of an act of violence, before the next day, we've gotten in touch with that principal or those individuals at the school to say, hey, this kid witnessed an act of violence. He or she may not be acting normally today, and make sure that you handle them with care. Those wraparound services help us protect our most valuable asset, and that's our young people. And we saw some decreases in violent crime in that age bracket. However, during the period of COVID, we did see some increases, especially with the availability of guns and those individuals, young individuals, that are willing to use them.
Handle with care. Next question. How do you ensure that police officers are deployed in a fair way across all neighborhoods? We got a lot of neighborhoods here. What innovations, including technology and new models of policing, do you believe have a proven community benefit and assist police to do their jobs effectively? How do you think technology should be used in policing? And how do you keep technology from reducing the human compassion police officers need to deal with members of the public?
Thank you. Leveraging technology in law enforcement has been giving us great strides in order to allow officers not to be bogged down on calls for service that typically don't require a police officer response or a two-car response. Anything from a plant stolen off of a porch or things of that nature can be reported now via the internet or over the phone. Definitely ShotSpotter is one of those uses of technology that's paid dividends in law enforcement throughout this nation for agencies that have had that. License plate technology, us knowing, camera technology, us knowing who's in the area at a specific time in order to keep the neighborhood safe, or providing us that criminal intelligence that we would need to investigate crimes. But we can't replace officers with technology, and we can't use technology to remove the officers from the community. I think while those tools are beneficial to us, the officers should be using their time to reconnect, build legitimacy and trust in those neighborhoods where we now have that time that we're not using for criminal enforcement time, but to get out and meet and speak with and be a part of the community. I'm a big proponent of that. I think that technology has its place, but nothing beats officer walking the block or the beat, getting to know who's in their community and making them a part of the solutions that we are doing to combat crime.
What technology or new model of policing do you believe in its ability to have benefit to the community?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that last question.
What technology and new model of policing do you believe has community benefit?
If I heard you correctly, what technology? I would definitely say data sharing, making sure that we collect data on where crime is occurring, how it's occurring, and why, but publishing that data not only to the community, but to our neighboring police departments to make sure that we collectively understand where the problems are occurring in order to effectively address those. And the best way we can share our information is putting it out there for the public to see via the web or Twitter or a number, other efforts to share our data and to let people know what's going on inside of their police department.
And how do we assure that we do not reduce human compassion in police officers interacting with the public?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. It's breaking up.
How do we assure technology does not reduce human compassion, the compassion that police officers need when interacting with the public?
By making sure that your officers are not relying purely on technology. Again, like I said, using technology to address crime is one thing, but the other part is making sure your officers are out there meeting the people, getting to know them, spending time with them, and at the same time, depending on those technological efforts to do their jobs.
Okay, last question. If you became police chief, how would you work to build community trust and ensure accountability for the department?
By inviting the public into what we're doing, making them a part of the process, whether it be a disciplinary process or shining a light on how we are developing policies and practices to increase community buy-in. I'm a big fan of citizen review boards. I will say I was a big critic of them until we got one. But how better to give the community voice and buy-in by making them a part of the processes that we have inside the police departments. The other part of that is just making sure that we shine a light on things that we do good and things that we do not so good, just owning it, but at the same time holding me ultimately accountable as the chief executive of the organization and be standing up in front of a camera or in front of a group of residents saying, we didn't get it right, and this is why, but this is our effort. We'll make efforts to make it better. Just owning the issues and being very, very transparent about it.
How do you build trust amongst communities who have histories and postures toward policing which make it almost impossible to trust? How do you build trust?
You have to make sure that you, while not a part of some of those efforts that occurred previously, make sure you make amends for them and make sure that we know that they won't be repeated, no matter if they happened a year ago or 20 years ago. Making a commitment to policing in a way that's transparent, that is representative of the communities that you're serving, but again, that's transformative in the way that we're going to police based on some of the suggestions and voice that we've given to the community, and standing by that, allowing the community to evaluate just how we're doing that, being nimble enough to make the changes where we see the changes need to be made. We can't do this alone. We need to get to the new era of policing, or some say reimagining policing, where we police as a community. We have to, as communities, sometimes police ourselves and to make sure that we're able to take care of one another effectively.
Do you have a specific example of how you have been able to build that new era?
Sure. So when I was hired as a Columbia police officer, our police department at that time bought a house in one of our most distressed neighborhoods. They asked for 2 officers to volunteer to live in this neighborhood. It was plagued by prostitution and heroin. And I was a college grad, didn't want to live with my parents, so I took them up on this offer. First night I stayed there, I got my hubcap stolen off my car. People remember hubcap thefts. But I lived, worked, shopped in that neighborhood. I became a part of the Waverly neighborhood. So sometimes citizens believe that officers whisk off into this magical lane when they're not working. But they saw me when I was working. They saw me at the grocery store. They saw me out for a jog. And just humanizing the profession made things a lot better. I had my opinions of what Waverly neighborhood needed to be successful and crime-free, but the residents had a whole nother idea. I took what my beliefs were, coupled with what their ideas and strategies were, and we came up with a comprehensive plan to reduce crime in our neighborhood. And we brought crime, I'll never forget, over 63% over the first 2 years of the officers living at the Waverly Street Code. And it's still in existence today. 2 Columbia police officers still live there. That's been my greatest joy, as being a part of the revitalization of a neighborhood that was in a downward trend. But having buy-in, giving voice, and actually doing what you're saying you're going to do will change minds and hearts, and the results are, will be there.
We have time, but I think you've answered the questions, and I'm going to behave. So with that, we appreciate you, Chief, and
Okay.
I think that's a wrap.
Thank you.
So, comment cards can be deposited on your way out. They'll be actively collected. If you have more comments, there's more blank cards. This is your voice. We value it. We treasure it. And my bottom line is, I'm for 101, baby. Thank you so much. Appreciate y'all. Have a good and safe night.
Oh, I bet you on the side.